Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I'm going to be talking about two Dario Argento movies, Deep Red from 1975 and Phenomena from 1985. And Deep Red begins with a prologue set in the mid-50s where an unseen figure stabs someone else to death. A bloody knife then falls to the floor close to a child's feet. 20 years later, we find ourselves at a parapsychology conference featuring psychic medium Helga Ullman. Helga is suddenly overwhelmed by the twisted, perverted, and murderous thoughts of someone in the audience. After the event, she confides that she believes she can identify this person, but she is unaware that her claims have been overheard. Later that evening, a black gloved figure invades Helga's apartment and kills her with a meat cleaver. English jazz pianist Marcus Daly sees the murder from the window as he passes by and rushes to Helga's apartment, where he finds her mutilated corpse. After the police arrive, Marcus thinks one of the apartment's paintings has disappeared, but he cannot pinpoint what exactly is missing. Reporter Gianna Bezzi identifies Marcus as an eyewitness, including publishing his photograph. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Marcus immediately finds himself a target of the killer. And together with Gianna, who feels guilty for endangering him, and so she should, he sets out to discover who it is that's hunting him. Now, you may be wondering what the police are doing in all this, and the answer mostly seems to be waiting for Marcus and Gianna to give them leads. Phenomena, meanwhile, also begins with a murder by an unseen assailant. This time, the victim is a 14-year-old tourist who is attacked and beheaded in an isolated cottage in the Swiss countryside. 8 months later, the case is being inspected by forensic entomologist John McGregor and police inspector Rudolf Geiger, who delivered the expedition that the young victim was the first in a series of murders of young women, a list of victims which now includes McGregor's former assistant. Meanwhile, a young American woman named Jennifer Corvino arrives at a Swiss boarding school where she quickly finds herself socially ostracized because she seems to have a strange connection with insects, a connection that leads to her befriending John McGregor, who hypothesizes that Jennifer has some kind of psychic link with insects. Jennifer also begins exhibiting a sudden pattern of sleepwalking, which leads to her accidentally witnessing a new murder, and so she becomes the target of the killer along with anyone who tries to help her. So off the back of those two synopses, you can probably see one of the reasons I decided to do these films in the same video. Both have the same basic plot structure. English-speaking outsider accidentally witnesses murder and must identify the killer before they too become a victim. It was a premise Argento used several times, not just in these two movies, with the separate identity of the films coming from the specific events within the pictures rather than their overall plotline. Now, both of these films also feature Italian actor Dario Nicolodi in a major role. Nicolodi and Argento had a long personal and professional relationship after meeting during the casting process for Deep Red. She appeared in at least 6 of his movies in total. Gaho wrote perhaps his most famous film, Suspiria, and is the mother of his second daughter, Asia Argento, who is also an actress. Nicolodi was not Argento's only frequent collaborator, however. He also worked extensively with the progressive rock band Goblin. This working relationship also began with Deep Red and would continue through to the 2001 film Sleepless. The foundation of the relationship was the excellent work that Goblin did on Deep Red, which is perhaps ironic since they were not Argento's first choice for the job. He initially contacted a jazz composer named Giorgio Gazzini for the job, but was unhappy with the result. British rock band Pink Floyd were his next choice, but they turned him down. I suspect either the monster success of Dark Side of the Moon had put them out of his reach, or the recording and touring for their 1975 album Wish You Were Here meant they were too busy. The score that Goblin produced was described by AllMusic as ambitious, effective, and totally distinctive. And it would prove to be a commercial smash hit as well. The soundtrack album, which the band apparently wrote and recorded in a period of mere days, sold more than 1 million copies, enjoying 52 weeks on the Italian charts. And I think the success was well deserved. Profondo Rosso, as it is known in the original Italian, is a tremendous soundtrack. I've admitted more than once that I tend not to notice soundtracks unless they're particularly bad or particularly good, and this was one I noticed for being good. Phenomena's soundtrack is a less memorable one to my mind, featuring less original music and more licensed material, including songs from Iron Maiden and Motorhead, but Goblin are involved there too. Now, one flaw that both films share, to my mind, is that of pacing. For my money, both movies are perhaps 15 to 20 minutes too long, an opinion that seems to be shared by the US distributors of both these films, who cut Deep Red by 22 minutes and Phenomena by a full 26. This shortened version of Phenomena was released under the title Creepers. If you see the title, film with the title Phenomena, you're likely getting the full 110-minute version. If you see it under Creepers, you're likely not. Now, somewhat compounding these pacing problems is the fact that Argento is most definitely not the kind of filmmaker who will handhold his viewers or explain things to them. In some cases, I think this is a result of bold confidence, an assumption by Argento that his audience will pay close attention. But other times, I suspect it may reflect a fundamental indifference to worrying about boring details. In other words, I think sometimes Argento omits explanations because he expects you to figure it out for yourself, and sometimes he omits explanations because he hasn't bothered to write them. If I were a betting man, and I'm most definitely not, I'd put money on Deep Red mostly falling into the audience doesn't need me to hold their hands on this category, and Phenomenon mostly in the I didn't bother to work this out one. It's a crazy, crazy film, but there's occasionally a whiff of laziness to all the weirdness. Which brings me to my final point of similarity between the two films, Argento's willingness to embrace wild ideas in both. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here on specifically what these wild ideas are, because I think it would undermine the impact of the films if I did so. What I can say, however, is that the final act of Deep Red is a great one. When that film finally cuts loose and starts accelerating towards its climax, it really cuts loose, delivering a finale of splatterpunk excess punctuated by one of the most audacious cinematic reveals I've ever seen. Phenomena also offers an audacious, blood-spattered finale, though to my mind, a less successful one. Also one that led to two of the actors being injured. Daria Nicolodi suffered scarring after being struck by a blunted knife, while Jennifer Connelly, yes, Jennifer Connelly of Labyrinth fame, had part of her finger severed. Fortunately, it was able to be sewed back on. Perhaps the most wild idea in Phenomena, however, is that Argento envisages a film as taking place in a world where the Nazis won World War II. Despite the fact that this has no bearing on the story and no character ever references it, the director has publicly claimed that it's set in a world where the Nazi order won. If the movie is watched attentively, then it's obvious that, from that perspective, whoever made it is working from this principle. Really? Okay. Fine. Sure. Whatever you say, Dario. At the end of the day, of course, we must turn our attention to the simple key question of, should you watch this films? And for Deep Red, provided you're okay with the slower paced first couple of acts, have the stomach for the film's gory violence, I'd say yes. It really is something quite interesting. For Phenomena, I'd say only watch it if you've already seen and loved both Deep Red and Tenebrae. Those are better Argento films to my mind, but if you really dig his stuff, then you'll probably dig this too. Next time, well, it's Valentine's Day next week, so it seems apropos to check out the 2001 slasher offering Valentine, starring Denise Richards, who must have been wondering how she went from being in a James Bond movie to this film in only 2 years. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you've seen either of the two films I talked about today, let me know what you thought of them.